Hello, Capricorn. I can feel that something is quietly shifting in your energy right now. And honestly, it feels like someone is looking at everything from a completely different perspective than they once did. They've had a lot of time to think, a lot of time to observe, a lot of time to sit with their own thoughts and wonder why Capricorn continues to cross their mind, even when they've tried to focus on other things. There's a real awakening energy coming through here, not the kind that happens overnight, not something impulsive or temporary. This feels deeper than that. It feels like a very mature realization that has been slowly taking shape beneath the surface. This person is beginning to see your true value. They're seeing your stability, your sincerity, the quiet strength you carry that not everyone fully understands. And what's interesting is, the more they reflect on everything, the harder it becomes for them to ignore what they're starting to recognize. Because this isn't just admiration. It isn't just curiosity. It's something that seems to be growing the more they pay attention to it. So the question becomes, what changed? What happened that made this person suddenly see you in such a different light? What is it about Capricorn that makes them unable to simply view you as someone who passed through their life and moved on? Wow, that's the feeling I'm getting here. Like something important is finally coming into focus for them. And I think the cards that are about to come through have a story to tell about exactly how they got here. A very clear image comes into my mind here. I see someone sitting alone at the end of a long day, no conversations, no distractions, no one sitting beside them, just a very ordinary moment. But somehow, in that quiet space, their thoughts drift back to Capricorn, and honestly, I don't think this is the first time it's happened. It feels like for quite a while now, this person has been doing everything they can to keep themselves busy. They've focused on work, responsibilities, personal goals, the things they believed mattered more than emotions. They kept telling themselves they didn't need to think so much about this connection. That time would eventually soften everything. That Capricorn would become just another memory somewhere in the background. But that's not really how things unfolded, because the farther they moved forward, the more they realized something never actually left. The Moon card comes through here, not in a dramatic way, not in a way that demands attention. It's more like emotions they carefully tucked away are quietly finding their way back to the surface. There are moments when an old memory suddenly appears out of nowhere. A conversation, a look, a feeling of peace that's difficult to explain. Things that seemed so small at the time, yet somehow carry so much weight now. This person has started asking themselves some difficult questions. Why is it that out of everyone they've met throughout their life, Capricorn is still the one they keep thinking about? Why does their heart keep returning here, no matter how much they try to approach everything logically? And what's interesting is, I'm not picking up simple regret. This feels different. It feels like an awakening, almost as if they're seeing Capricorn through an entirely new lens. Because there was a time when they became used to your presence, used to knowing you were there, always sincere, always steady, always giving without needing recognition for it. And because of that, they may have started taking those things for granted without even realizing it. But distance changes people. Distance has a way of revealing the true value of what we once had. The Ace of Cups card appears very softly here, and the feeling I get is like an emotional doorway opening again. This person is beginning to let themselves feel more, instead of avoiding, instead of trying to control everything through logic. They're finally listening to their heart, and that heart keeps leading them back in the same direction, back to Capricorn. There's something really beautiful about this energy, because it doesn't feel impulsive. It doesn't feel temporary. This feels like the kind of realization that only comes after someone has had enough time to reflect, enough time to lose something, and enough time to understand what truly matters. The Lover's card appears right after that. And honestly, I don't see perfection here. I don't see a fairy tale. What I see is someone slowly realizing that certain connections change us, not because the other person tries to change who we are, but because their presence inspires us to become a better version of ourselves. That's what Capricorn seems to represent for this person. And the part that confuses them the most is that they haven't been able to find that feeling anywhere else. The more they compare, the more experiences they have, the more new people they meet, the more obvious it becomes. I still feel like this person hasn't said everything that's on their mind. They're watching, reflecting, trying to understand everything happening inside them. But one thing is becoming impossible to ignore. They no longer see Capricorn the way they once did. And that shift is leading them toward a much bigger realization, one they've been postponing for a very long time. Because, wow, the feeling I'm getting here is that the real story may only just be beginning to reveal itself. What I'm feeling very strongly here is that this person has started looking back on everything with a level of honesty they've never really allowed themselves before. No more excuses, no more explanations designed to help them avoid what they truly feel, just silence. And within that silence, a lot is becoming much clearer. I keep seeing the image of someone unexpectedly passing by a familiar place. Maybe it's a street, a coffee shop, a song playing somewhere in the background, a certain scent in the air. Things that seem completely ordinary somehow pull them back into memories they've kept buried for a very long time. The Six of Cups card appears here, and honestly, the feeling I get isn't regret, it's remembrance. It's remembering things they once overlooked, moments they used to think were ordinary, a short conversation, a few encouraging words, a time Capricorn listened without judgment, a time Capricorn stayed when other people walked away. Those moments may have seemed small at the time, but the older and wiser they've become, the more they realize not everyone is capable of giving that kind of presence. Not everyone has the patience to show up for another person in that way. I feel like this person is beginning to understand that Capricorn gave them far more than they ever realized. It wasn't just attraction, it wasn't just emotions, it wasn't just a special connection. Capricorn became a place they could return to after their hardest days. Someone who made them feel like they didn't have to constantly prove themselves. And what's really interesting is they only fully understood the value of that once they stopped experiencing it every day. The Judgment card comes through here. And wow, this card carries the feeling of an inner calling. Like something deep inside is asking them to revisit the entire story from the beginning. Not to blame themselves, not to punish themselves, not even to dwell on mistakes, but to understand. To understand that sometimes we become so consumed by our own struggles that we fail to notice who is genuinely standing beside us. I see this person realizing that they once assumed Capricorn would always be there, always patient, always understanding, always willing to give them more time. But time has taught them something different. No one is obligated to wait forever, and that realization has been sitting heavily on their heart. Because for the first time, they're asking themselves whether they truly appreciated everything Capricorn brought into their life. There are nights when sleep doesn't come easily, not because they're longing for some perfect love story, but because they're finally seeing things they missed before, things they weren't mature enough to recognize at the time. The Temperance card appears very gently here, almost like a quiet stream moving through emotions that were once chaotic. And what's interesting is, this person isn't reacting the way they used to. They're calmer now, more reflective, more grounded, more mature. They're no longer trying to run away from the questions in their heart. They're no longer trying to deny the impact Capricorn left on them. Part of them is beginning to accept that this connection may have meant far more than they originally believed. Now, I don't see them rushing into action, not yet. The energy still feels observant, listening, reflecting, taking everything in. But there is a very real shift happening underneath the surface. Because the more they look back over the road they've traveled, the more they understand that Capricorn wasn't simply someone who passed through their life. Capricorn left a mark in places much deeper than they ever expected. And as that realization continues to grow, another question begins to form in the back of their mind. A question they can't seem to ignore. Is that opportunity still there? Or did they finally understand all of this a little too late? That question just doesn't seem to leave their mind. It shows up while they're working. It shows up in the middle of a meeting. It shows up while they're driving home. And sometimes, it even appears during those moments when they're convinced they've finally focused on something else. Yet somehow Capricorn is still there, not in an obvious way. More like a thought quietly sitting behind every other thought. I feel like this person has been trying to fight that for quite a long time. They genuinely believed that if they stayed busy enough, these feelings would eventually disappear. That if they focused hard enough on responsibilities, goals, and their own plans, they would stop thinking about Capricorn. But things haven't unfolded that way at all. Because the more they tried to fill their life with other things, the more they realized there was a space inside them that nothing else seemed able to fill. The Eight of Swords card appears here. And honestly, what I'm seeing isn't someone trapped by circumstances. It's someone trapped inside their own mind. They keep asking themselves the same questions. Does Capricorn still think about me? Does Capricorn remember what we shared? Would Capricorn still be open to me if I came back one day? Those questions keep circling, again and again, without answers. And somehow that silence only makes them think even more. There are days when they tell themselves they should let it go, accept that this belongs in the past, accept that life has moved on. But then all it takes is one small reminder, a familiar song, a certain place, a random memory, and suddenly they're right back where they started. What I'm picking up here is someone beginning to realize that emotions aren't always something logic can solve. Because if logic had all the answers, they wouldn't still find themselves awake in the middle of the night thinking about things they've never said out loud. The Nine of Swords card comes through very strongly, and wow, this feels heavy. Not because they're suffering in some dramatic way, but because they're finally facing truths they've avoided for a very long time. The truth that Capricorn became more important than they ever admitted. The truth that they spent too much time believing they had endless opportunities. The truth that they're no longer sure everything is waiting exactly where they left it. And honestly, that's what scares them the most, not how they feel. But whether Capricorn still feels anything at all, I can feel a very real fear here, a fear that arrived late. A fear of recognizing someone's value after circumstances have already changed. This person starts imagining different possibilities. Some of them give them hope. Others leave them completely silent, because they know life doesn't pause for anyone. And Capricorn isn't standing still either. Capricorn has a life, choices, new roads continuing to open ahead. And the more they think about that, the more they realize they can't keep standing in the same place forever. The Four of Cups card appears like a very quiet moment. I see someone sitting alone with 1,000 thoughts running through their mind. Things that once seemed incredibly important suddenly don't matter quite as much anymore. Things that once held all of their attention no longer feel the same. There's an emptiness here that's difficult for them to explain, not because something is missing from their life, but because they're beginning to understand that one person left a much deeper impact than they ever realized. And that person is Capricorn. Now, what's interesting is, I don't see answers yet, not clear ones. But I do see something else. I see someone who has stopped running. They're sitting with the question now, looking directly at it, allowing themselves to feel everything they've spent so long trying to bury. And you know, when someone finally stops running from their own heart, that's usually when the most important decisions begin taking shape deep inside them. What I'm noticing here is that their attention slowly begins shifting away from Capricorn and back toward themselves. Not because they care any less, not because the feelings have disappeared, but because they're beginning to understand that some answers can't be found in another person. Those answers have been sitting inside them all along. I keep seeing the image of someone spending more time alone than they used to, showing up less, sharing less, seeking less validation from the people around them, almost like they've entered a very personal season of life, a journey that nobody else can walk for them. The Hermit card comes through very strongly here. And honestly, the feeling I get is that this person is finally being honest with themselves for the first time in a very long while. They're no longer blaming circumstances. They're no longer creating explanations for why things happened the way they did. Instead, they're looking directly at themselves, almost like standing in front of a mirror and asking the hardest questions. Why am I so afraid of opening my heart? Why do I pull away whenever something starts becoming serious? Why do I always convince myself that I have to handle everything on my own? And wow, these aren't comfortable questions. There are days when they want to avoid them completely. Days when they want to go back to old habits, old patterns, old safe places. But the more they try to return to who they used to be, the more they realize they aren't that person anymore. And that's where the Death card appears. The energy of this card feels like a door closing very slowly. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but with certainty. Old beliefs are losing their hold. Fears that controlled them for years don't seem as powerful as they once were. Ways of living that used to feel safe are starting to feel restrictive, almost suffocating. I think this person is realizing something really important. Protecting your heart and closing your heart are not the same thing. For a long time, they confused those two ideas. They believed distance was safety. They believed silence was control. They believed that keeping their emotions hidden would somehow protect them from being hurt. But Capricorn unintentionally showed them a different truth. That a life without risk can also become a life without genuine connection. And that's where something begins to change. I can feel this person slowly letting go of an older version of themselves. The version that was always guarded, always suspicious, always afraid of losing control. Not overnight, not all at once, but little by little. Almost like sunlight gradually breaking through after a very long storm. The Ace of Swords card appears here, and the very first thing I feel is clarity. Not the kind of clarity that instantly solves every problem, but the kind that finally stops a person from lying to themselves. They're beginning to see what they truly want, beginning to see what they truly feel. And honestly, that can be even more frightening than uncertainty, because once you've seen the truth, It's very difficult to go back to pretending you haven't. I see this person starting to imagine the future differently, no longer as a life built entirely around themselves, no longer as plans that only involve their own goals. Someone else has started appearing in those visions, someone they once weren't sure they should allow into their life. Capricorn. And what's interesting is, this feeling still feels new to them. They're still adjusting to it, but it's growing stronger. Because the older they become, the more they understand that a serious relationship requires more than feelings. It requires readiness. And I think this person is standing right at the edge of that realization. The question is no longer, do I have feelings for Capricorn? The question becoming louder now is, what am I going to do about these feelings? And honestly, that's the moment when the energy of this story begins moving into an entirely different chapter. I'm picking up on a very different energy surrounding this person now. Less chaos, less inner conflict, less of that constant tug of war between fear and emotion. It feels like after standing at a safe distance from life for a very long time, they're finally beginning to think about stepping forward, not because of a sudden burst of inspiration, not because of impulsive promises, but because of something much more grounded, much more mature, much more serious. The Two of Wands card appears here, and what I see is someone looking toward the future, not looking back anymore, not focusing on what was lost. Their eyes are fixed on what's still possible, on what could still happen from here. And honestly, there's been a major shift in the way they're thinking. There was a time when they kept asking themselves whether they should open their heart, whether they should step into this connection, whether it was worth the risk, whether it was worth the sacrifice. But those questions don't seem to carry the same weight anymore, because now they're asking something entirely different. If I truly want Capricorn in my life, what kind of person do I need to become? And wow, that feels like a huge moment of growth, because for the first time, this person isn't focused on what they can receive. They're thinking about what they can give. Capricorn no longer appears in their mind as some distant dream. Capricorn appears as someone they could actually build something meaningful with. And that changes everything. I see them thinking about serious conversations, long-term plans, choices they never really considered before. Not because someone is pressuring them, not because they're being forced into anything, but because they genuinely want it. The Chariot card comes through very strongly. And the energy here feels like movement, real movement. This is someone who stood still for too long, thought for too long, watched from a distance for too long, and now they're beginning to feel the desire to act. What's interesting is, they don't want time making decisions for them anymore. They don't want circumstances deciding everything. There's a growing awareness here that opportunities don't always remain exactly where we left them. And if something truly matters, sometimes we have to move toward it. I can feel this person slowly rebuilding their confidence, but not the kind of confidence that comes from ego, not the kind that says they have all the answers. This confidence feels different. It comes from understanding themselves better, understanding their emotions more clearly, understanding what they actually want. And somehow, Capricorn seems to have become part of that growth, because this connection forced them to look beyond temporary needs, beyond short-term comfort, beyond immediate gratification. It pushed them to think about things that could still matter years from now. And I keep noticing the King of Pentacles card here. This card shows up almost like the image of someone who is beginning to think through responsibility instead of emotion alone. This person no longer wants to show up in Capricorn's life empty-handed. They want to bring stability, certainty, consistency, a more mature version of themselves. I feel like they're setting new standards for their own life, things they once postponed, things they ignored, things they convinced themselves weren't important. Suddenly those things matter, because deep down, they've realized something. If they truly want to build something lasting with Capricorn, they can't keep showing up as the person they used to be. And honestly, there's something really beautiful about that. Because this energy isn't coming from pressure. It isn't coming from fear. It isn't even coming from the possibility of losing someone. It's coming from a genuine desire to become better, more dependable, more grounded, more capable of walking beside another person through the long journey ahead. And I think that's exactly why a new door is beginning to open. Because when someone starts thinking seriously about the future, they inevitably begin wondering what that future might look like if Capricorn is standing beside them in it. Honestly, the energy of this story feels softer now, not because the feelings are fading, but because everything seems to be finding its proper place. It's almost like after a very long journey, this person has stopped trying to outrun their emotions. They've stopped trying to control everything the way they once did. And there's a sense of peace beginning to emerge inside them. A peace that comes from finally understanding what truly matters. Because what I'm seeing here isn't just a story about love. It's also a story about partnership, about finding someone whose presence naturally becomes part of the future you imagine for yourself. I see this person beginning to picture the simplest things. Not grand gestures, not dramatic moments, not some picture-perfect fantasy, just everyday life. Sharing a cup of coffee in the morning, talking after a long day, knowing exactly where you stand in each other's hearts. Knowing that no matter what life brings, there's someone standing beside you. The Queen of Pentacles card comes through with such a warm energy here. And wow, there's so much appreciation attached to it, so much admiration. This person sees Capricorn as someone who creates stability without ever needing to prove it. Almost like wherever Capricorn goes, things naturally feel more grounded, safer, calmer, easier to breathe. And what's touching them most right now is the realization that they want to become that kind of energy for Capricorn too. Not just someone who receives love, not just someone who feels cared for, but someone who can offer something meaningful in return. Someone who can truly be a partner. Because I think they're beginning to understand something important. A lasting relationship isn't built on the most beautiful words. It's built on the choices we make every single day. Presence, trust, consistency. Two people choosing to move towards something meaningful together. The Ten of Cups card appears very gently here, but somehow it softens the entire energy of the reading. I see someone who is no longer thinking only about themselves. They're beginning to think in terms of we, such a small word, yet it changes everything. Because when someone starts thinking as we instead of me, their decisions change. Their plans change. Their priorities change. And what's interesting is, this doesn't feel unrealistic to me. Quite the opposite. This energy feels grounded, mature, very Capricorn. It's not about creating a perfect future. It's about being willing to walk through an imperfect future together. And honestly, that's where true stability comes from. The Wheel of Fortune card appears during the final moments of this reading. And the feeling it carries is beautiful, almost like a circle quietly completing itself. The things that once created distance between these two people somehow helped them understand each other more deeply. The periods of silence that once felt confusing ended up creating important realizations. The lessons each person needed to learn separately are beginning to connect in unexpected ways. Not through force, not through pressure, not through rushing, but naturally. Like two roads that traveled in different directions for a long time before gradually beginning to move toward the same horizon. And you know, the most beautiful thing I'm seeing here isn't a promise about the future, it's readiness, a willingness to grow, a willingness to open the heart, a willingness to build something meaningful, a willingness to choose what matters instead of choosing what's easy. And I think that's why this person no longer sees Capricorn as a closed chapter from their past. In their heart, Capricorn is slowly becoming part of a future they genuinely want to step into. So, I'm going to leave that energy right here. And if this message happened to find you at exactly the right moment, maybe your heart has already been quietly sensing this shift for much longer than you realize. Virgo, I think this is where I'm going to leave things for today. Because honestly, not every story needs to reveal its ending right away. Sometimes the most important part is what we're learning while we're still making our way through it. If any part of this message spoke to your heart, take what truly resonates with you and gently let the rest drift away. Thank you for spending this time here with me, for listening, for feeling, for sharing this energy together. You know, you truly mean a lot to me. And I'm always grateful for these moments when we get to meet again in this little corner of the world. Please continue taking care of yourself. Continue trusting your worth. Continue moving forward at your own pace. There's no need to rush, okay? I'll be back soon with another reading. Virgo, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate every one of you. Until next time, take good care of yourselves. All right, bye for now.